Interfaith Network and the NIU History Department. And Seal, it's great to see you. Thanks for being instrumental in getting me here again. And Dan, it's nice to see you too. And congratulations on everybody's important activism that's been going on for so many years here. I think that's just crucial if we're going to change this country for the better. You know, that title, You Have No Rights, it came to me because I was looking at what was going on after 9/11. And it was pretty clear by my study of just going through back issues of the Progressive dating back to Fighting Bob's day, Fighting Bob La Follette's day, that, you know, in time of war and when the United States is attacked, there's going to be this civil liberties assault here at home. And La Follette warned us about it actually in his writings in 1917 as he was opposing U.S. entry into World War I and being assailed and called a traitor and almost kicked out of the Senate. His writings in that period were some of the bravest writings I think we ever published. And anyway, so I was looking at what was going on after 9/11, and there were these two Egyptian-American brothers who, about 6 weeks after 9/11, were arrested in New York City. And they were taken into the Metropolitan Detention Center there. And they were, they had their feet chained together in cuffs, and the guards kept stepping on the chain in between their feet and making them trip, and they banged them on the wall as they were walking them in. They made them kiss the American flag. And after a while, one of the Egyptian Americans said to the guards, look, you know, what about my rights here? And the guard responded, you have no rights. And so it was such an arresting kind of alarming kind of a quote that I made it the title of the book. But more and more, as I've been looking around at what I call the edifice of repression that Cheney and Bush erected, it does appear like, you know, we have fewer and fewer rights. And then when President Obama came along, and he ran on a pledge of restoring our civil liberties in this country and restoring our reputation as a country around the world, I thought things might turn for the better. But actually, he's done nothing to tear down that edifice of repression that Bush and Cheney erected, and actually what he's done is put a couple more floors on the building. And I want to talk in some specifics about what's happened here in this age of Obama. You know, when he was running for president, I was excited. I think a lot of people in this room probably were excited. My daughter, who was 18 at the time, was knocking on doors for Obama. My wife was knocking on doors for him. I took my daughter to Iowa for the Iowa caucuses, and we could recognize right there what was going on because we got there early. We went to all the campaign headquarters, and we went to Hillary Clinton's headquarters, and there were just a few people there. They were very officious. We went to Edwards' headquarters, and at that time, it was though Edwards was going to win. I mean, he was living in Iowa. He had labor support. People thought Edwards was going to win. There was almost no one there. And then we went to the Obama headquarters, and the place was just hopping. And so it was very exciting to be in Dubuque, Iowa, the night of the Iowa caucuses, as Obama's campaign took off. And so everyone was euphoric in my household, and you know, 100 million people or more in this country were pretty euphoric that history was made that day, on election day. And yet, he didn't really deliver in a lot of ways, and one of those ways he didn't deliver was on civil liberties. And some things he just continued, and I want to talk a little bit about the things that he continued. You know, he just continued Guantanamo. In fact, that was his first pledge that he reneged on. He was going to shut down Guantanamo within a year, and he had the power to do it as commander-in-chief. And lo and behold, here we are more than 3 years later. Guantanamo is still open. There are 171 people still in Guantanamo. Been there for years and years and years, some for 10 years, uncharged. 89 of them actually have had their cases reviewed and been cleared for release, and yet they remain there. And now Congress has put some restrictions on what the president can do, but he had the power of, as commander-in-chief at the beginning, to get that closed down and to get those people either released or in custody here in the United States where they belong and charged, and so they can go on. And so this was, I think Obama recognized what a blot Guantanamo was on the U.S. reputation overseas, and he wanted to erase that blot, but the eraser hasn't worked. And so here's Guantanamo still, you know, we just passed, what, the 10-year anniversary of Guantanamo. And there's been a lot of great activism around Guantanamo. People get dressed up in orange jumpsuits or put hoods over their heads, and they go to Washington, and they do protests. And one of the things we do in the Progressive every month is we highlight this activism. We think it's just really crucial that grassroots activism happens and is reported on and is celebrated, because that's how we think social change happens in this country. We're disciples of Howard Zinn, who wrote for us for many, many years before he died. Howard Zinn, the great historian, People's History of the United States, is his most famous work. I know Rosemary's got a film out on Mother Jones. Howard Zinn, before he died, got together something called The People Speak, where it was kind of the movie version, the 1-hour documentary on people's history of the United States. It ran on the History Channel. Just 6 months before he died was the time it got released. I actually was in New York for that screening, and it was a real fun event. But anyway, grassroots activism is crucial. It's one of the things that distinguishes the Progressive, I think, from other magazines out there. Just the focus we have, the centrality of our focus on activism at the grassroots. And this issue here, if you haven't picked it up, is on the Occupy movement. And we give that a lot of focus, and we give voice to a young woman who is a college student who actually went to Zuccotti Park for 6 weeks and tells about her experience. You know, a lot of people pontificated about Occupy Wall Street. We wanted to get the voice of someone who actually was there, and so we did that. So anyway, Guantanamo, still open. Indefinite detention overseas, what I refuse to call extraordinary rendition, which sounds antiseptic. What it is kidnapping and taking people overseas and putting them in dungeons, essentially. It's a medieval practice. Bush was doing it, and Obama's doing it still. Actually, at Bagram Air Force Base in not in Guantanamo, in Afghanistan, there are 1,700 people there. Not charged, there indefinitely. That's 3 times the number of people who are being held at Bagram Air Base when Bush left office. So not only has he continued it, he's actually tripled the number of people he's holding without their due rights under the Geneva Conventions. The United States is a lawless country right now, with the violations of the Geneva Conventions that have been going on. I mean, we're lawless in some other ways, like waging aggressive wars, like violating the War Powers Act and the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, that says only Congress can declare war. What Obama did with Libya against the Constitution, against the UN treaty. But that's kind of a little detour. There are 2 major things that Obama has done different than Bush did, or added on to what Bush and Cheney did, that are really corrosive of our civil liberties and of our constitutional system. The first is the doctrine of assassination. The President of the United States has asserted the right to assassinate anybody, anywhere in the world, even a U.S. citizen, if he and he alone decides that that person is a terrorist. And he's acted on it. He's actually killed 2 people. Al-Awlaki, this guy in Yemen, and you may have heard of him because he was the one that they were targeting. This was the so-called propagandist for Al-Qaeda. And maybe he was a propagandist for Al-Qaeda. But does that...
Also his son,
well,
16-year-old son.
16-year-old son, and there's another person, Samir Khan, who is a 20-some-year-old editor. I'm sensitive to editors being assassinated. This editor of an Al-Qaeda paper, allegedly an editor of an Al-Qaeda paper, was killed in the same attack. And so, what is the check on this? Now, I'm not one of those crazy right-wingers that thinks Barack Obama is going to install, martial law tomorrow. But what I am afraid of is that this whole setup, this whole apparatus, this whole edifice is there for a president who has less scruples than Barack Obama does, and who has more temptation to be a dictator than he does. And our founders warned about temptation in the executive office. Madison warned about not giving the president the right to go wage unilateral war because he said it's too much temptation for one man. And we saw how much temptation it was for George W. Bush, and we've seen the temptation for Barack Obama in Libya. Actually, before the election, I was talking with my colleagues at the Progressive, and I'm kind of skeptical and I'm kind of jaded, and so that bugs them a little bit. But, before the election, I said, look, there is a chance that Barack Obama is going to be FDR in drag. In fact, there was that Newsweek cover that had Obama as FDR in drag in January with the monocle and everything. But I said, look, and I'm a poker player, and I put percentage wagers on a lot of things. I said the likelihood is that he is going to be a composite of Bill Clinton and H.W. Bush, because he was praising during the campaign H.W. Bush's foreign policy. Actually, he praised Reagan a little bit. Turns out he was a composite not only of H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton, but H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush. And that's been a real problem. My colleagues, actually, I bowed to them, and I took out that sentence in an editorial that was going to appear in the last issue before the election in 2008, because they just thought it was just too depressing to lay that on people. But actually, I think I underestimated the amount of continuity. We need to see continuity here. There is change. Obama's not the same as Bill Clinton, not the same certainly as H.W. Bush. His rhetoric is a whole lot better. Some policies are a whole lot better. He's not as scary as Dick Cheney, who still scares me in the middle of the night. So I think there are a lot of similarities. And those are some of the things I'm talking about today. There's similarities with Guantanamo. There's this similarities with this kidnapping. Bush, George W. Bush may have had the same assassination doctrine that Obama's had, but he didn't articulate and didn't come forward and just says, this is my right as the President of the United States. I mean, it is an astonishing right. And I think had George W. Bush said it, I think everyone in this room probably would have been out on the street, you know, the very next day. And there's been a demobilization of many people. I know not the hardy, steadfast weekly vigilers here. Throughout the country, I think we need to recognize that there's been a demobilizing, almost paralytic effect that President Obama had, at least at the beginning, the first couple of years, on this movement of ours that we need to sustain. So the assassination doctrine is one of the new things that really scares me. The other thing just happened recently, and that's the signing of the National Defense Authorization Act. This was something that Obama threatened to veto and didn't veto, and I never thought he was going to veto it, because after all, if he says he can assassinate someone, what's going to stop him from putting someone in indefinite detention, which is what the National Defense Authorization Act.
He said he wouldn't use it.
Yeah, so his statement afterwards was, I, as President of the United States, am not going to incarcerate any American citizen and hand them over to the military without trial while I'm president. But the problem is the statute is there for the next president or the next president after that to grab and say, look, you know, I'm going to imprison, you know, 10,000 people in DeKalb and 20,000 people in Madison because I think they're terrorists. And there's nothing to stop him from that. And he's got the military. And he's got a piece of legislation that says it's okay. And so that's what's frightening about all of this. So the National Defense Authorization Act enshrines indefinite detention. Now, Congress, after 9/11, gave W. Bush a blank check to go and attack anyone, any country, or any group of people, or any individual that he said was behind 9/11. But now the National Defense Authorization expands the group of people that the President can go after. So it is people connected with Al-Qaeda, people connected with the Taliban, people connected with undefined associated forces, or anyone who undertakes a belligerent act against the United States or conspires to or helps out somebody who's doing a belligerent act against the United States. That's an incredibly elastic doctrine and can, you know, grab anybody within that elastic that the President really wants to. So it's indefinite detention without charge.
You can even just send some money to a charity.
Well, that is one of the, you know, that would be giving support to. And so it enshrines indefinite detention, it expands the group. It says also that the President can, it also enshrines this deportation and kidnapping. It says the President can take anybody, including a U.S. citizen, and take them and give them to another foreign country or another foreign entity. Those are the exact words, foreign country or foreign entity. Now, there used to be a restriction about sending these people who are being kidnapped by the U.S. military and the President to a country that engages in torture. Now, W. Bush and Cheney and Condoleezza Rice would wink at that and say, well, the Jordanians or the Libyans, when they were our friends, when they were torturing people we were sending over there, you know, they're not really going to torture, and that was just a big lie. But they would do the formal wink and a nod. Now you don't need to do the formal wink and a nod according to this legislation. You can just send them to any country, including a person's country of origin. So if you came to the United States fleeing persecution and were granted amnesty here, and then the President says you're a terrorist, he could then send you back to that country that's going to kill you. And so that's the law too. And what about this expression, foreign entity? Wow, he's going to give someone who's being kidnapped, even a U.S. citizen who's being kidnapped, hand him over to a foreign entity? What, is he going to hand him over to some U.S. mercenary company, some Blackwater newfangled company in Abu Dhabi? That's a foreign entity. And they're going to use us as a little plaything then? I mean, the possibilities, the really venal possibilities that are written into this law are quite extraordinary. Now, the Obama administration contended not only that they wanted to apply it, to any U.S. citizen while they were in power, but that this law actually doesn't expand any given law and give more power to the executive than it's been there before. But that is a dodge too, because you can include in that declaration of war from 2001, from 9/11, an expansive interpretation, and Bush and Cheney did that in every single court that they entered into after 9/11. And what Obama is saying is, and has done, is sends his own Justice Department actually to continue some of these same things that Bush and Cheney were doing in the judiciary. One of those is the state secrets doctrine. This is another area of continuity between the Bush-Cheney administration on civil liberties and the Obama administration. So, for instance, someone in Guantanamo was saying, I'm being mistreated here and I don't belong here. They want to go to the courts to get some due process. And the Obama administration will say, sorry, we can't give this information to you, the plaintiff, or to the judge, and so you've got to throw this case out because proceeding with this case would jeopardize state secrets. And it happened also with a case against Boeing Airlines. Boeing Airlines was being sued by one of the people who was kidnapped and sent to another country and tortured terribly. Actually, I think it was in Morocco. Really grotesque torture to the genitals. And it was on a Boeing plane, so they wanted to sue Boeing. And the Obama administration went in and says this court case do not go on because the continuation of this court case would reveal state secrets. And so they can just bring out this trump card of state secrets anytime they want almost and deprive people of their ability to get justice in the courts. And this is kind of an old regal British monarchy tool that has been imported over the last Bush, Cheney, and Obama years to really deprive people of their rights.